Hello and welcome to this Academy talk on the ISO 19650 updates. In this video, I'll be looking at the why, the who and the what, plus explaining how you can get involved in the review process. Every 5 years, ISO standards undergo a systematic review, a formal process where standards are evaluated to ensure that they remain relevant, allowing national standards bodies to vote on whether to keep, revise or withdraw them. And at the end of 2023, the systematic review process was initiated for Parts 1 and 2 of ISO 19650 by a specialised subcommittee responsible for overseeing the review process. Based on feedback and voting by national standards bodies, a consensus was reached to revise both parts, and given its close technical relationship, Part 3 was also brought into scope for the revision. So, following the decision to revise the standards, an international working group is set up, made up of experts nominated by each of the national standards bodies, plus project leaders for each of the standards, and a convener. The revised standards are then drafted by the project leaders, but their direction and contents are shaped by the consensus reached in the working group meetings. So everybody has their say, and the drafts reflect the group's decisions. Ultimately, the working group's role is to develop the revised drafts on behalf of the subcommittee and to work towards an international consensus, with all proposed revisions subject to a formal balloting of the national standards bodies. So far, the national standards bodies have agreed that Parts 1, 2 and 3 are to be revised. Part 3 will be combined with Part 2 to establish a unified information management process, and the scope of Part 3 will now be guidelines for implementing the unified process within Part 2. The national standards bodies still have decisions to make in relation to the draft standards, as to whether to approve them, approve with comments, disapprove with technical justification, or abstain. And this is where the public consultation comes in. Each national standards body is seeking feedback from industry so they can determine a single national position before they vote, and if required, which comments will go forward to the working group for review. This is typically done by a mirror committee within the national standards body, made up of subject matter experts plus representatives from professional bodies and academia. Once complete, it's then back over to the working group to review the comments from each country and to reach a consensus before the national standards bodies get to review the final draft and vote on whether to approve, disapprove or abstain. So let's take a look at the proposed revisions to each of the 3 standards. The scope of Part 1 remains unchanged, in that it covers the concepts and principles for information management across the whole life of the assets, this time without separating the delivery and the operational phases. In the draft, you'll see that the working group are proposing to restructure the contents into what they believe will be a more logical order, and to include some of the concepts introduced within existing Parts 2 and 3, such as parties and teams. They're also proposing to move anything considered guidelines into Part 3, and this includes Annex A and many of the diagrams, although the working group are proposing to remove some of those entirely. You'll also notice a stronger alignment with the other parts of ISO 19650 that were produced after Parts 1 and 2 were released, along with many of the other standards which support information management directly or indirectly. For example, the Level of Information Needs standards, ISO 7817, and the Information Delivery Manual standards, ISO 29481. So the scope of Part 2 has expanded beyond the delivery phase and now defines the requirements for information management across the whole life cycle of assets in the form of a business process. And so the working group have done their best to bring these 2 worlds together and to create a unified information management process that also incorporates the lessons learned and experience gained around the world since the standards were first released. Beyond this, the look and feel of Part 2 will be familiar to those of you who use it on a regular basis, as the structure is still based on the process steps and the activities within them. Part 3 has a new scope of defining guidelines for the implementation of the unified information management process. So before drafting Part 3, the working group identified the scenarios that they felt would benefit from some detailed guidelines. For example, implementing the process on asset-related projects of different complexity, collaborating with teams in that different size and structure, and also addressing the distinct perspectives of each of the parties involved in the process. They're also proposing to include some guidelines on a few key components that support the information management process, such as information production planning and the common data environment. Note that Part 3 will be released for public consultation separately to Parts 1 and 2. The working group have worked really hard to prepare these drafts, and now it's your turn to have your say. Submitting your comments to the national standards body will ensure that your national position reflects a diverse range of perspectives and expertise. And don't forget to include feedback on the things that you like about the proposed revisions, as this is just as important as the things you don't like. By sharing your views, you can help shape your country's national position and the comments that will be presented to the working group for review. To find out how to submit your comments, or if you'd like to find out more about the ISO subcommittee and working group, search for ISO TC59 SC13 or contact your national standards body.